Hey, hi everyone. This is Sai from Let's Upgrade. So let's talk about how to get your certificate. It's very simple. You will see two links in the description. Number one is the place where you have to go and mark your attendance. Marking your attendance tells us like, okay, you are a legit student who have attended this particular session. Link number two is your assignment. This is where your 90% of the priority is. You have to go and submit the assignment that is given to you in this particular session. Once you're done submitting that assignment, we will be evaluating that. We will send you an email. If you get the passing criteria, then only we will give you the certificate on a particular date that is mentioned again in the description. Please check these three things, and this is the way how you will get a certificate from Let's Upgrade. Number one, mark your attendance. Number two, just go ahead and upload your assignment. Check for the email that you have received it, yes or no. What is the feedback that you have received from your trainer? Number three, check on which date the certificates will be released. Thank you. Bye. All the best. Happy learning.
Hey everybody, welcome to this interesting workshop on extracting structured data from resumes with AI. Before we begin this workshop, let's ask ourselves a few questions. Are you tired of manual resume screening? If yes, then this workshop is going to teach you how to turn hours of data entry into seconds of intelligent extraction using Python and AI. Imagine having every candidate's skills, experience, and education perfectly organized in a spreadsheet the moment they apply. Today, we make that a reality in this workshop with Python and AI powered data extraction. So, to stop reading resumes and start unleashing the power of AI, let's pick up the code editor and get started on this journey. Let's have a look at what we have to offer. So, if you look at the contents, we have the introduction and overview at the beginning, then we discuss the software and requirements. Uh, then we have an overview of Pydantic, which is one of the important Python libraries used in data validation that we are going to use here in this workshop to validate the data which the JSON is going to generate. Then these three next layers talk about coding, which we shall discuss in detail later. And then at the end, we basically play around with the tool and experiment with how the tool basically works, right? So here's the overview, right? So as you see on the screen, this is going to be the user interface of the final tool that we're going to use, that we're going to generate using Streamlit, right? So the left hand side, you basically have an unstructured resume text, a sample text. You're going to paste your own text over here, and then the middle portion is going to be creating the required JSON schema for you, and then the right portion is going to be extracting the JSON in a structured format for you, the way you basically request that. All right. So this is the final output on the right hand side, which you can easily parse using your data parsing techniques, right? So if this sounds exciting, let's get started with the next section. All right, so now in this section, let's talk about the software and requirements that you need to be having on your machine prior to starting this workshop. So you require a version of Python which is 3.10 or higher, just in order to be safe for working on these libraries. So because primarily we're going to use the Google Gemini API, which usually works better with these versions. Then we're going to use the Streamlit API, which also works better with versions of Python that are like 3.10 or higher. And then we're going to use something called as the Pydantic library, which is nothing else but it's a data validation library, which is offered by the Python open source community, where you can basically define your data validations within classes. And then these validations get reflected in the kind of data which you want to be validating against, right? We'll see that an overview in the next session. So let's go to the next session now. So let's talk about a Pydantic now, which is a data validation and settings management library for Python. So we are going to use this library extensively in this workshop because the JSON output that's going to be generated requires a kind of validation against data types, right? Like say, for example, your ID has to be a number, your name has to be a string, your email has to be an alphanumeric string, right? So these kinds of checks need to be made before the generated output is used for production, right? So for that purpose, we have this Pydantic library, which is an open source library in Python. The way to do it is to download that using pip install, right? All these required libraries are downloaded using pip install. So as you see, you can define your own classes here, your data schemas, and at runtime, it ensures that the data conforms to these schemas, right? So that's basically an overview of Pydantic for you. So with this introduction and background, let's start coding the first application. All right, so now we start writing our first code, before which we got to create our project. So let's go to projects and then say new project. And then let's select the location where we want to do it. So I paste the location here and then I say select folder. Then I name the project as structured data extraction from resume. Right, and then I say create. That creates a new project for me. So now I save this file in the same project directory using a name like say extract data, right? I say enter. That's my file. So now let's start importing the libraries. First one is we say import OS, then import JSON, Streamlit, then your Gemini API, then now Pydantic we import the base model and the field, right? There's another one called as typing. Let's dictionary. So we have put libraries here. Now the task is to define the output schema. So we said define right, using Pydantic. We create a class called as, so now for experience section and then the resume data section, we create two separate classes. So let's see how this works. So class experience base model. So that's the constructor. Say title is a string. So field is a method in the Pydantic library where right. So we are defining here the data types and then the descriptions for the respective fields in the experience section. So the next one is going to be say company is also a string and description name of the company. Then the duration, which is going to be again string. Which is basically the time period worked. Example, Jan 2020, December 2023. Responsibilities. This is going to be a list because it's a list of responsibilities, right? So this is going to be like, say, bullet points or something. So all right, so that does with the experience class. So now let's look at another one, which is class resume data. Right. So once you finish with the experience sections, the next one is your metadata, right? So which contains your name, your email, your skills, and your experience. So that's this class. So let's say base model name field equals the full name of the candidate, email, primary email address, and then the skills, right? There should be a list. Trying to right in the experience section. Right, so here You see, this experience is this class that we're passing as an element here. So there's the list of all the experiences, right? Which goes inside. So right. So with this, we are done with the defining the output schema using Pydantic. So now in the next section, let's actually try to work with the Google Gemini API where we define the API call and then the actual Gemini model, and we design the Gemini components because you're going to interact with the LLM, right? So let's design that in the next section now. So let's move to the next section. Right, so now let's start coding the Google Gemini API extraction function. So Gemini extraction function is what we call it. Then define the function, say extract resume data. So within which we are going to define the Google Gemini API, resume text, string, API key is a string. These two function, right? It takes in the resume text and the API key, and then this returns a string, right? So if not API key, so like if the API key is blank or something, or if it's wrong, we're going to handle that, right? Return JSON dot dumps. Say error Gemini API key is not set. Intent equals 2. And so just give it an indentation there. So if the API key is not present, or if it's blank or something, then Gemini has to populate this error, right? And if it's present, then now we basically start writing the code. We say try right. So we now create the GenAI client by passing the API key. Now we are defining the actual prompt for the LLM, right, to be used. So let's say Say parse the following resume text, extract all the information into the required JSON structure, focus specifically on extracting a comprehensive list of skills and a detailed list of experience entries. That's the prompt, and then now we pull the response client dot models dot generate content. Now we mention the model name and other details. So the model is, let's use Gemini 2.5 Flash Lite. Contents. Gemini 2.5 Flashlight, because that's a faster version of Gemini for these kinds of applications. Contents are basically the prompt and the resume text, right? Those are the contents, right, that we feed to the model. These are on which the model is going to be generating its response. And then the config equals, now we're defining the configuration in which format require the responses. So response 9 type application slash JSON, right? And then response schema resume data. This shows that we want the response in a JSON format. And then this is basically the schema that we're passing, right? So the one that we basically declared as a class, that we want the name to be a string, the email to be a string, the skills to be a list of string, and the experience to be a list of experience, this schema, right? That's what we have passed here. So, and then there's another parameter called as temperature. Right, but it's supposed to be, let's keep it 0.1, because we don't want too much of variation here. So temperature is a parameter which basically affects the amount of variation or the noise in the large language model. So for more creative applications, like say you want to generate some transcript for your speech or something like that, or you want to be creating an image model, that's where you can use a high temperature. But then for applications like these, where you want the exactness of the data, so that's where you set a lower value of the temperature. right? Right, and then let me close this. I think it's already closed this bracket. Right, so we are done with the response, and then say return response.text. And now we have to handle the exception block for this try. So accept exception as E. Right. So return JSON dot dumps then we say error API error occurred. E. Then intent equals 2. Right, so with this we finish the Gemini extraction function, but let's add some comments to that so that it helps us understand what we're doing, right? So let's define some comments at the beginning. So let's say the args. Let's elaborate on the arguments. Let's say resume text is basically the raw unstructured text of the resume. Then API key your Google Gemini API key, right? Then this returns a JSON string containing the extracted data or an error message. All right. Let's elaborate on the function here. It says it uses the Gemini API to extract a structured data from the resume text. Right? It uses the Gemini API to extract a structured data from the resume text. So that's it. So I think that's all this function is about, right? Where you consume the resume text, basically the unstructured text data from the resume, and then the Google API key has two arguments, and then you check whether the API key exists. If no, then you return an error. Otherwise, you call the Gemini API client, and then you pass this prompt, which says like extract all the information into the required JSON structure. Focus specifically on extracting a comprehensive list of skills and a detailed list of experience entries, and then you specify the model, you specify the prompt, and the resume text as the contents, and then you specify the config, saying that your resume type is the JSON, your schema is your resume data, which is this one, that includes this experience as well. And then your temperature is set as zero point 0.1, which as we discussed is because of a lower preference for noise or randomness, right? So with this, we finish the coding part involved with the Google Gemini API. Uh, so now there's one section remaining, that is the user interface. So for the user interface, we use Streamlit, and using components in Streamlit, we will be calling this Gemini function at the backend, right? So if this is clear, let's move to the next component of coding Streamlit. Here we go. All right, so with this, we move to the final component of coding, that is coding the Streamlit component. So this is now for the user interface, which we code in Streamlit. So let's define, let's say, Streamlit application layout. So now we define the so os.get environment, or maybe os.environment.get. So here's the thing, you got to be defining your API key like this. So create an environment variable, name it as Google underscore API underscore key, and then the value of this variable has to be the actual Google API key that you download from the Google API Studio, right? The Google AI Studio. So you should be having your own private API key, and then store it as an environment variable like this, and then you basically use this method os.environment.get. Now you pass this environment variable, and then the Gemini API key then can be used anywhere, right? So that's the first step. Then the second step is to check for a missing API key. So if not Gemini API key, then what you do is you say streamlit.warning and you say Gemini API key environment variable not found. Please set it for the app to function. Right, something like that. Then we also give another flexibility for the user to enter that as a user defined variable if it's not been set as an environment variable. So let's say allow user input if not set for demonstration purposes. Equals where we provide a sidebar in Streamlit where the user can input the key. Then say error key optional if environment variable is set. Type equals password. So what this is going to do is it's going to encrypt the letters which you type into this sidebar, right? Because an API key is as secret as a password. So you're not supposed to reveal that to the public. So that's the reason why we typecast it as the password, where all the letters are going to be concealed as asterisk marks, right? So that's that. Now we start coding the actual components of Streamlit. So we say Streamlit dot set page config. Now it's the page title, resume, data, extractor, then layout equals white, right? And then title that's going to be AI powered, or we can say AI powered resume data extractor. Or so use the Gemini API with the Pydantic schema to reliably extract structured data from unstructured text. Right? That's the markdown that we provide in the user interface below the title. Now let's do one thing. Let's paste a sample text that we have. So once the user interface pops up, right, for the first time, it should be having some sample resume text on the left-hand text box so that the user gets to view a sample JSON extraction in the middle and then the actual text data extraction in the required schema format on the right hand side, right? So to have a sample resume, let's have one from the repository. So I'll just paste one that I have from the repository. So let's define a variable called as example resume. This is something of some John Doe or somebody. So you see there's an example resume which I have here. This is going to be pasted on the left-hand text box while the user interface loads, right? So the user gets a clue as to how the unstructured text is going to look like before generating the output, right? And now we actually create the three columns. The first one is for pasting the resume text, the unstructured resume text. The second one is for converting to JSON, and the third one is to extract the information from the JSON in the required schema, right? So create three columns for the layout. So column 1, column 2, column 3 equals streamlit dot columns 3, right? So now we define three columns, and now to customize the individual columns, we write further lines of code. So we say with column 1, and we say input section streamlit dot header here's the thing. uh, Unstructured resume text, right? Then we say resume underscore input in streamlit dot text area. Then we say example resume. We pass this example that we just did as an argument. Then height equals 400. That's the height of the box. So leave this here. Pardon. Now we create a new button there, which will basically create the data extract on the right hand side in the required schema, right? So once the user presses that button, it's going to be created the output. But then we need to define the methods within the button. So that's what we do. We say if string.button, say extract data. Then we check whether there is an input resume unstructured text, right? Otherwise we populate this error, right? And then we also check if the Gemini API key has been provided. Else, what we do is we process the application further, where we call the extraction function now, where we say extract resume data, and then we store Now we are coding for the next column, column number 2. We are again mentioning the header. This is the JSON schema, right? The second one. So the unstructured text that you feed in column 1 is what we extracted as a JSON schema in the second column. Generate the JSON schema. Okay. Now we validate we basically have the schema dictionary that we pass. You see resume data, the one that we created above, right? Resume data, that's the one that we use to validate against basically we generate the JSON schema from this pydantic model for display, right? And now let's define the column 3, right? So with column 3, the output response section, define the header first, then the markdown, we define the output text, and then we want to check for all the different kinds of validation. So if it's a JSON file, it should start with curly brackets, right? So that's what you do first. Then we're checking if we have individual sections like the skills. Then we say success skills found. Then we parse strings accordingly. The output doesn't start with curly bracket, then display an error message. The error, right? The JSON output. So with this, we have finished coding the Streamlit components as well, right? So basically what we've done here is we've defined 3 columns, column 1, column 2, column 3, which are basically text areas, right? And then this is markdown where we just populate the JSON schema. And this is again a markdown, which is basically the structured output that follows the schema which we have defined, right? And this is the example text which we would be observing on the left-hand side of the user interface, which as soon as the UI opens, the user gets to see as a sample resume. And then based on this, the user is then going to type 2 to 3 different kinds of resumes, right, in the output. So all right, so there you go. That's it. We are done. So in the next and final section, let's actually play around with the tool and see how you basically utilize this tool to derive a resume in an unstructured format into a structured format kind of result, right? So without wasting further time, let's get to the next section. So here's the thing, we got to add some finishing touches to the code in order to prevent the user interface from not displaying itself in its most optimum format. So right here, what we have done is we have declared the Streamlit components as conditional blocks inside the Gemini API key check, right? So let's not do that. Let's bring them outside. So like this. So now this white layout, right, is going to be seen even otherwise, right? Let's get this rolling. So what's going to happen is that these configurations were earlier set as a part of the Gemini API key check, which actually happens after the extract button, right? So let's not do that. Let's do it even before. So probably this should work, right? Maybe it's not after the extract button, but then let's anyways do it like this, right? So yeah, so now let's get started with the actual playing around with the tool. All right, so here we go. So finally, it's time to play around with the tool in the final section, which is the green one over here. We have finished all of this along with coding the three components, and now it's time to experiment with the tool. So let's copy the path where the code is saved, and then let's open the Anaconda prompt and run the Streamlit application using the command Streamlit run, then the path, right? So let's give time for the application to load. All right, here we go. So the app is now going to load. All right, so here we go. Here's the app. So as you see on the left-hand side is a sample unstructured resume, and the middle section is the one that prescribes the required schema of the JSON format, and then the right hand side is basically the extracted JSON, right? So when we click on extract data, right, here's the thing. So it basically parses the entire text in this JSON format, and here's it beautifully given up to us, right, to extract the text in the way we want. So you have the name, your email, your skills in the list format, and then you have your experience. So suppose you want to extract the responsibilities of this employee from his latest organization or maybe his previous organization. So what all you got to do is just take experience as a key of this dictionary and then pass the ID, right, which is one, and then you get all the responsibilities of the previous organization. Isn't that simple and beautiful, right? So let's try this with another sample resume which I have. Let's try this one. This is again an unstructured one. So we type this into the extracted text here. Then we say extract data. So here you go, right? Here you have the person's name, then you have the email, and then all the skills in the list format again. And then again, your experience ID 0 with the title, company duration, responsibilities, beautifully extracted to you in a structured format here, which you can clearly parse as a JSON file, right? So suppose I want to be knowing the name of the person's latest organization. All I got to do is just go to this JSON and then go to experience 0 company, right? Then I get the name of this organization. It's that simple, right? Which would have been difficult just looking at this resume, right? Let's try one last example. And let's paste it here. Let's say extract data. All right, here you go. So here's the name of the person, right? And the email as well. And we have these skills in a list form, and then the experience again in a list form. So this is the first item of the list, and this is the second item of the list, right? So, in this way, we have successfully extracted data in a structured format from an unstructured resume text. I hope you like this workshop. I wish you the very best with your learning in this workshop journey, and I'll catch you in another workshop. So, until then, take care. Bye bye.